everybody, and welcome to the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast with yours truly, Bill, the company's expert. And today we're going to talk about how to answer everybody's favorite job interview question: why should we hire you? You're pretty much guaranteed to encounter this question in any job interview you go to, and you'd be surprised how many people don't know how to answer this correctly, and consequently they get eliminated because of it. So we're going to give you the best answer for that, and we're also going to field a question from a viewer who wrote in asking about non-compete employment contracts, what they mean, and what can you do to reduce the impact of them. So we're going to get into that also. Okay, so here we go. So the most common job interview question, I believe, is tell me about yourself. However, the second most common job interview question is this: why should we hire you? Now, this question has many different forms. There's many different ways they can phrase it, but it's actually a very good question. And you know, I've heard so many different answers for this, and let's get some stuff out of the way here. If you're a candidate in a job interview and the interviewer asks you, so why should we hire you? What you don't want to say is, well, why would I want to work here? Don't say that. Okay, let's get that out of the way first. A lot of people comment on my videos, especially when I talk about this question, and they say, well, that's how I would respond. Yeah, don't do that. Bad idea. That's failing the test right there. First of all, I've been a hiring manager, and you know, when I post a job and someone applies for it, and then I bring them in for the interview and I say, why should we hire you? And they say, well, you know, why would I want to work here? Well, my immediate thought is, well, you tell me, you applied for the job. You know, I didn't tell you to apply. You applied for it of your own accord. So presumably you want to work here. Why is that? You know? So yeah, it just comes across as hostile and kind of rude. So don't say that. That's really not what you want to say. Now, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I understand where a lot of people are coming from. You are absolutely correct. The job interview is technically a two-way process. The organization is vetting you, and you are vetting the organization. So, okay, fair enough, yeah. But that still doesn't justify answering this question with a sort of borderline hostile response, okay, that actually comes across as belligerent. So please don't say that when they ask you this question, okay? Now, the other part of this, okay, is most job interview questions, you got to be careful because their purpose is basically to eliminate you. It's to uncover dirt, call you out on it, expose a reason why you would be a bad candidate. They would not want to choose you, and they eliminate you. That's the purpose of most job interview questions. They're fishing for red flags. They're fishing for things that would be reasons to not hire you, okay? Almost every single question they're going to ask is to that end. So when they say, you know, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or, you know, how do you handle stress? Or tell me about a time when you did this. They're looking for potential problems with you. However, this question is not like that. This question is where they're asking you to sell yourself. They're saying, look, tell me all the good things about you. Tell me why you would be the candidate. Okay? Show me what you got. Show me, you know, your strengths. Okay, that's what this question is. So this is a great question to be asked. And the other thing that's going on is that it plays directly into the main purpose. You're in a job interview, because the whole reason you're in the job interview is you're going to communicate to the recruiter or hiring manager, or indeed any interviewer that you have. You're going to communicate to them what's so great about you. And you're going to communicate how you're qualified for this role. And you're going to communicate why you're a great fit. Okay, that's your purpose. That's what you're there to do. And this question allows you to do that. It's like putting it on a silver plate. You know, please tell me what's so great about you. So that's the context of this question. Okay. Now, another thing I got to get out of the way first is another I don't know if this is a common response, but a lot of people comment, they post this in the comments. They say, if somebody asks me, why should we hire you? I would say, well, so I don't starve. Right? That's a common thing that people say. Don't say that. Once again, you fail the question. Now, what's going on here is that they're not asking you why they should give you a job. Okay, I mean, obviously you need a job to make money, to live and prosper. I mean, yes, that goes without saying. But this question is not asking, why do you need a job? The question is asking, why should this company pick you over all the other contenders, all the other candidates? That's what this question is asking. It's not saying, why should you have a job? It's saying, why should we pick you instead of these other people? Okay, so that's what it's asking. Okay, let's get that out of the way first. Now, if I was the candidate and somebody asked me this question, because this is such a good question to be asked, like I just said, the first thing I would say is, I was hoping you'd ask me that. Okay, that shows like, yes, you said the right thing. That makes me happy. Things are positive and you're being honest. Okay. So why should we hire you? You say like, awesome. I was hoping you'd ask me that. And then you give your answer. Now let's get into what the answer is. Okay. First thing you got to know, recruiters care about requirements. Okay. You could be talking to a hiring manager or you could be talking to a recruiter, and hopefully you know the difference between those. The hiring manager is the person that if you get the job, they would be your boss. You would report to them. That's what the hiring manager is. Okay. A recruiter is a completely different type of person. A recruiter is someone who works in HR, and their job is to find people. Okay. That's what their job is. So the way this usually works is that a recruiter is handed a list of requirements from a hiring manager or a client, if it's an external company. And the recruiter's job is, you come up with a short list of candidates that have all of these. Okay. And if you do that, you get paid. If you can't find people that have all these requirements, well, then sorry, you don't get paid. That's basically what their job is. Okay. Recruiters care about requirements. So if you're being interviewed by a recruiter, their primary concern is, do you have the requirements for the job as stated in the job posting? Okay. That's what they care about. So knowing this, you're going to speak directly to those requirements. Okay. So the way you answer this question is you explain how you have the things they're looking for. What are they looking for? Well, they're written directly into the job posting. So if you answered a job ad, like a job posting, maybe online, maybe it's on the company's website. We're looking for this person. Here's the job. Here's the title of the job. Here's the details. And this is the things we're looking for. Someone with this amount of education, somebody with these skills, somebody with this much experience at various things. Those are the requirements, and they give those right to you. Okay, that's what they're looking for. So a big part of answering this question is telling them, look, I got all those. Okay, and you're going to go down that list. Okay, so let's return to this then. They ask you, so why should we hire you? And you say, wow, great. I was hoping you'd ask me that. This is what you say next. You say, well, as I understand it, you're looking for someone who, and then you go down the list of requirements. You're looking for somebody who has a degree in this or has this certification. Well, I got that. I got that 5 years ago. And I got, for what it's worth, you could say I got great marks at school doing it. You're looking for somebody who has these skills. Well, I have those skills. I have a certification in this. I have 10 years experience doing that, et cetera, right? You're looking for somebody who has 5 years experience doing this. Well, I actually have 7 years experience doing that. And I haven't just done the same thing for 7 years. I've kind of seen all sides of it. So I'm very experienced in that, right? So you're going to be going down the requirements and speaking to each one. Okay. So recap. Why should we hire you? You say, great, I was hoping you'd ask me that. Well, as I understand it, you're looking for somebody who, and then you go down the requirements. Okay, that's how you answer the question. Now, as I said, this is a great question to be asked because in a lot of job interviews, you really don't get a chance to talk about what you want to talk about. A lot of times you get a bunch of questions fired at you. And so you spend your time just sort of answering what they want to talk about. Let's say you're going for a systems admin type job. Like you work in IT and you've been a systems administrator for many years. You've run a data center, by yourself. You're sort of the middle manager that deals with the data center. You have people under you, and you've applied for a job working in a data center, and you go down there and you're all excited to talk about your experience and, how you've dealt with different types of problems and come up with unique solutions for it and overachieved. And that's what you want them to know. But the problem is you get there and they start asking you, well, how do you deal with stress? If you were any animal, what animal would you be? The questions like this, and you don't really get a chance to talk about what you want to talk about. You don't get a chance to speak freely. Well, this is the question you've been waiting for. Okay? Why should we hire you? Well, let me tell you, the floor is yours. You now can talk about what you want to talk about. Okay? So the question is, what should you say to best convince these people to not eliminate you and to move you to the next stage of the hiring process, whether that's another interview or it's an offer letter? Okay. So we've already established that recruiters and hiring managers, but maybe mainly recruiters, they care about requirements. Okay. So your purpose in the job interview is to communicate to them explicitly how you meet all the requirements for the job. Okay. Now, the question that a lot of people ask at this stage is they say, well, when you look at the job posting, they've got a pretty long list of requirements there. They've listed 25 things that they're supposedly looking for. And I hate to admit it, but I have maybe 20 of those, but there's 5 of them that I just don't have. Right? So what do I say? Do I avoid talking about the things that I don't have so I don't draw attention to them? Or do I say explicitly, like, I don't have that because I know it's going to come up at some point? Or do I try and make excuses for it? Now, here's what I would say to that, okay? When I say go down the list of requirements and speak to them, that doesn't necessarily mean that you tell them that you meet that requirement in full, okay? What you should do, in my opinion, and in my experience, is to alleviate their concerns that you would not be a good candidate because you might not have that requirement. Let me explain. Let's say they're looking for 5 years experience in a certain thing. Okay, let's say you're applying for that systems admin job in IT, running a data center. And one of the 25 requirements was you have to have 5 years experience with legacy tape backup systems. Okay, these days we don't store our data on tapes really anymore, as is my understanding of it. Instead, we use hard drives. We archive things on hard drives. They used to use tape backup systems until recently. But they're looking for somebody with 5 years experience in tape backup systems. And you have everything on their list except for that. So assuming you've already mentioned that you meet the other 24 requirements, okay, should you not mention tape backup systems? I would say no. If you've already spoken about the others, I would say, look, here's the deal. I don't have 5 years experience with tape backup systems. However, here's what I do have. I have 1 year experience working on them. However, in a previous job, okay, not running a data center, I've had 5 years experience dealing with tape systems in a different application. Okay. I didn't deal with it directly. I dealt with it indirectly, but they were a part of my job. So I have been aware of them for many years. I've had some involvement with them for many years, not precisely in this application, but I believe I know my way around a tape backup system. I've worked on them for 1 year. I know how similar they are to the application I've done. So it's really not an issue. Okay. I will be able to handle tape backup systems without any issues. There'll be no learning curve for me. Something like that. Okay. You don't have the requirement technically, but you can speak to it. You can alleviate their concerns. You can try and convince them that technically missing requirement is not going to be a concern. Okay. So that's an obvious question that people have. And you know what? Quite frankly, most jobs, you will not meet every single one of the posted requirements. The reality is that not all of the stated posted requirements are technically required. Okay. It's a sort of list of what would be nice to have, but it may not be realistic and it may not all be required. Okay. So don't be intimidated by the fact that you don't technically meet all of the requirements. Okay. That's something you got to know. Now, the other part of this is that, like I've said previously in this podcast, if you were called in for a job interview, that suggests that you have all the technical requirements that they were looking for on paper. When they looked at your job application and they looked at your resume, they didn't see any red flags. They felt that they should still talk to you. And they wouldn't have done that if they felt that there was a glaring omission in your resume or your application that suggested you weren't qualified to do the job. Okay, so if you're there, don't worry too much about not meeting all the requirements. The fact that you're there signals that you are qualified. What they're really wanting to get at in the job interviews, number one, they're going to try and verify that you do have what you say you have. So for example, if you say that you managed a data center and they ask you 5 questions about managing a data center, you should be able to answer them. You should be able to show, and it should be obvious that you know what you're talking about. Okay. If you say you spent 5 years managing a data center and you can't answer the simplest, most basic question about how to manage a data center, that would be a red flag. Okay. So that's one of the reasons you're in the job interview. They just want to verify that what you say you have rings true. Okay. It's almost like an early form of checking your references. Okay. It's a verification. The other reason that you're in the job interview is they want to see how you're like as a person, essentially your soft skills and your attitude. So if you look qualified on paper and they invite you down to the job interview and you're hostile, rude, and you just don't seem to understand manners or protocol, and you seem completely uninterested in working with them or answering their questions. You seem to hate the whole process. And they're left with this impression that, like, wow, I would really not want to work with that person. Okay. That's what they're checking for. Okay. That would be a red flag when it comes to your attitude and your soft skills. So they're checking your soft skills and your attitude. They're not looking for you to explain that you have soft skills. They're testing your soft skills directly by interacting with you. Okay, that's the other purpose of the job interview. Okay, so when it comes to this question, another question I've been asked by a lot of people is, should I mention my soft skills? You say that they're looking for the requirements for the job, and we know that the requirements for the job also include things like having a good attitude, being able to collaborate with people, being able to communicate with people, being able to be somewhat charismatic, perhaps, especially if you have like a sales type job or a diplomatic type job. Should I say I have these things? And I say, well, I don't suppose there's any harm in saying it, but I wouldn't waste my time, because it's not about you saying you have them. It's about them verifying directly through your communication and your interaction at the job interview that you have them. Okay. Instead of saying like, well, I have a great attitude, they're seeing your attitude directly. Okay. So saying it doesn't really do much. Okay. So that's kind of the other thing that's going on here. Now, what can be a real help is that when you go to a job interview, you don't have to memorize a 25 item list of everything they were looking for. Okay. What can be very helpful is make sure when you go to the job interview, whether it's a virtual interview or whether it's a, in-person face-to-face interview, that you have a copy of the original job posting with you. And what can be helpful is that if you have this printed onto a piece of paper, I know it sounds behind the times and passé, but yes, people still use paper and you can use paper. It doesn't signal anything unprofessional, except perhaps if you were in some areas of IT, every other industry, it's fine. What can be really helpful is that if you have a copy of the job posting and you have that list of requirements as part of the job posting, if you take a highlighter and you highlight maybe one word on each of the requirements so you can just quickly glance down just 1 or 2 seconds and jog your memory as you're talking to them and maintaining eye contact, that's very efficient, and it allows you to know that you're being complete when you go down this list. You're not omitting or forgetting to talk about anything critical. Okay. So that can be a real trick. Okay. Now, one more issue here. Another common question I get asked when I talk about how to answer this question. People say, well, listen, Bill, when people ask you how to answer other job interview questions, like tell me about yourself, you said that the way you answer that is you can mention the requirements. Okay. It's a very similar answer to what you're saying now with how to answer, why should we hire you? Okay. Now, my problem is that if they've just asked me, tell me about yourself, and I started talking about my requirements, and then they ask me this question, why should we hire you? And then do I give the same answer? Wouldn't that be weird? Am I just repeating myself? What do you say to that? And I say, first of all, yes, your entire purpose in the job interview is to communicate to them so they understand how you're qualified. And you know what? If somebody talks to you about all the things that they have, somebody you don't know, and they just go into a spiel about everything that they have, their work history, their qualifications, their skills, do you remember every single one? Say 2 days after they've said it? No, you don't. Did you have a chance to write every single thing that they said down? No, you didn't, right? So repetition is a good thing. You'd be surprised how much of what we say people don't remember. You don't have to take my word for this. Just think about this podcast. If you've been listening this long, we're something like 23 minutes into this podcast. Do you remember every single point I have made so far? Could you write a list of them? If you stop the podcast? No, you wouldn't be able to. You might get several of them, but I pretty much guarantee you would not get all. Okay? And for that reason, if they ask you, tell me about yourself, and you start talking about how you're qualified, and then they ask you, why should we hire you? And you still keep talking about how you're qualified, it's fine. I mean, don't do anything stupid like use the exact same words as if you memorized the speech. That would be weird. It also might be misconstrued. If you repeat your exact points the way you said them, that might be a bit strange. It almost like if you do it in a certain way, it could be taken as, well, I'm repeating this to you because you obviously didn't get it the first time I said it. Right? And you don't want to do that. You don't have to say the exact same thing. But the way this is usually going to work is that when you're asked the first question, tell me about yourself, okay, you will have a chance to speak to some of the requirements. And then in the subsequent questions, like why should we hire you, or any other question where you need to explain why, what are your strengths and why they should hire you, you would speak to perhaps different requirements. And if you do have extra time, you can repeat yourself for emphasis. That's okay. Because the more you repeat something within reason, the more people will remember it. And that's what you want. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. That's the way to answer. Tell me about yourself. So just quick summary. If they ask you this question, why should we hire you? I should say, why should we hire you? You say, well, wow, I'm glad you asked me that question. As I understand it, you're looking for someone who, and then you go down the requirements. Who has 5 years in this? I have it. Who has this qualification? I got that. I actually have it with honors. And who has these skills? I have those skills and then some because I have this experience, right? And you go down that list. And that's why you should hire me. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, moving on. I have a question that was sent in by a viewer. Okay, now this is Matt Whetstone, if I'm saying that correctly. Matt Whetstone. Matt says, you should do a video on non-compete. All it does is limit the employee's earning potential. Okay, well, I'm going to address that here. Now, listen. Non-compete. Now, this is a legal question. Something I want to make very clear is that I'm not a lawyer. And even if I was, depending what country and what region you're in, this is going to vary. Okay, so if it's really important and you really need some ironclad legal advice on how you should handle a non-compete agreement that perhaps you signed, okay, obviously there's no substitute for going and talking to an actual corporate lawyer that works within your region, your country and your region. So the advice is perfect, okay? So I'm not going to give anyone any legal advice. I'm going to tell you my opinions and my attitudes and my experience based on non-compete agreements. Now, I've signed many non-compete agreements. I've employed people that as part of their employment contract, there's a non-compete clause, okay? And this is common in various industries. So depending on what industry you work in, this could be very commonplace. Now, I'm going to talk about non-compete agreements as they apply to workers, okay? You can get non-compete agreements in other areas. Like, for example, mergers and acquisitions. If you're buying somebody's company, one of the things is usually as a condition to the sale that they can't just immediately set up their own company, a new company, and compete directly with you. Okay. So non-competes are very commonplace in that world. Okay. But I'm talking about non-compete agreements that are part of employment contracts when you're hiring a worker. Okay. That means anyone who is not a director of an organization. Okay. So they're not the owners, they're the actual employees. Okay. Now, a lot of industries employ this. Okay. They'll say, congratulations, we'd like to give you a job. Okay. Here is a draft of the employment contract and, we'd like you to sign it and we'll be in business. Then you're an employee and you start on this date and we go from there. And if you read the employment contract, which you always should, there'll be a section that says, if you do decide to leave, okay, or you are terminated, perhaps under certain conditions, then you agree that you will not work in this capacity or this industry for a certain amount of time. It could also say the region. You will not work in this industry, in this region for a certain amount of time. It could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, something like that. Okay. And the purpose of that is because perhaps in your job that you're just getting, in your role, you will have access to trade secrets or confidential information. A common example is that if you're working as a salesperson, you would have access to the company's client list. Okay. And the danger is that they hire an employee who has access to all their client lists, all their contact information for the people that pay them. Right. And that employee copies the information. They then quit their job. they either go to a competing company or they set up their own company and start trying to sell a similar product to that list of clients. Okay, so that would be a common scenario. And so to protect an organization from this kind of risk, they make every employee, when they're hired, agree to a non-compete clause that says, I agree that on condition to me working here, if I am terminated, I will not work in this industry for 2 years in this region. Okay, so I will not be able to come back and compete with my previous employer. Okay, now in my experience, these clauses are commonplace, and in my experience, okay, especially on a worker level, when you're like asking line workers to sign this, when you're asking supervisors to sign this, and possibly when you're asking managers to sign it, not executives, but just middle managers. In those situations, in my experience, the non-compete clause is more bark than bite. Okay, it serves as a clear way to communicate to the employee that we are concerned about this risk. We don't want you to be doing this particular thing. And if you do, there could be consequences. Okay. Now, when it comes to the actual enforcement of the non-compete clause with the people that I mentioned, workers, supervisors, and possibly managers, it's a lot harder to enforce. It requires the organization, the employer, taking you to court, starting litigation against you, and having it be reviewed. Now, where I am in my country and region, okay, I'm in Canada. I'm in Manitoba, specifically the province of Manitoba, which is within Canada. I mean, you have the law that governs this is called the Corporations Act, and that lays out, how businesses behave, the business law, essentially. Okay, so that would be the article of law that governs that, and it says, if you want to enforce a non-compete, this is generally what you do. Okay, and then it's up for you to bring litigation against the employee who's left and you suspect is, violating their employment contract with you, their agreement, where they said they wouldn't work for 2 years in this industry, etc. Okay. Now, in my experience, this is my personal experience. I'm not giving advice. I'm just explaining my opinions based on my experience, that in very rare cases for workers is this enforced. It can be enforced by law. And there are some employers that are, shall we say, more litigious than others. They jump to a litigation-based solution before other employers would. And a lot of employers just don't do this kind of thing. I mean, they want to make it very clear to employees that, look, we are getting you to agree to this, so you better not violate it. But they're not actually going to go after an employee. And it can be difficult for them to do so. Okay. However, just beware. Okay. You are signing a legal agreement. Now, you should make sure that, in my opinion, there's no harm if an employer is giving you an offer letter and the offer letter includes a non-compete clause. There's absolutely nothing wrong with questioning them about it and saying, look, I'm a bit concerned about this. I mean, I don't intend to reveal any trade secrets or sell any information or do anything improper, but I'm concerned at how limiting this is. If I take this job and for whatever reason I'm laid off or it doesn't work out, this is a big impact on me. So can you reduce the scope of this to say trade secrets or, whatever, something like that? But just saying I'm not going to work in this industry for 2 years, that's like after I leave here, that's very limiting. Okay. So you may be able to get them to change some wording there. Otherwise, if it were me and it was in my country and region, I would not worry about it too much, assuming, of course, that I'm not intending to do anything improper. Okay. That's the assumption running under all of this here. Okay. So that's what I would say about that. I mean, the thing is, you can argue. I mean, once again, I'm not giving legal advice, but you can argue in court like, look, this is too limiting. I need to make a livelihood and my skills are based in this industry. I kind of have no choice and I can't relocate, not easily, not within a reasonable amount of effort to do that. So getting it to stick can be challenging in my experience. But a lot of companies will drop it anyway. And a lot of smaller organizations won't really have the resources to pursue this as a matter of course, unless they strongly suspect that you've done something improper and it's cost them a lot of money. Okay, so that's been my experience and those are my opinions. But as I said, if you really want to be sure, talk to a business lawyer, a contract lawyer, in your region. Okay. So that's the type of person that would be able to help you. You can usually find them in the old days. You could find them in the phone book, but I'm sure you can find them on the internet now. Go to Google, go to Maps, go to your hometown and type in contract lawyer and see what lights up on the map. And usually several will light up on the map. Those would be the contract lawyers or contract law firms near you. So you can give one or more of them a call and they should be able to answer your questions in great detail. So thank you very much to Matt Whetstone for sending that in. I appreciate you guys sending in comments. I get some very intelligent comments, things that I can't answer in 1 or 2 words in the comments section of the videos. So if you send in your comments and they deserve an answer, but the answer is long, I can address them here in the podcast. So thank you very much to Matt. Okay. So hopefully that made sense. That's the end of our episode for today. Thank you very much for listening. All of you guys listening, you're awesome, especially if you've listened right to the end, 36 or 37 minutes into it. You guys are great. Have yourselves a great week, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.